Hi everyone, and welcome to this second micro update. I haven't done too many of these. It's my second one, trying to get back on the horse. So on this occasion, I'm going to be trying to answer some questions from IgreX, which I believe is a founding member. So let's get into it. So this person asks two questions. The first question is, will the upcoming 3 updates zero out the blockchain, or will they be soft? So the updates he's referring to are the new networks that have associated runtime upgrades. And he's asking whether they'll be soft. So I think a little bit of context could be useful here for everyone else who may not have full understanding of what that question entirely means. So you have to keep in mind, in a blockchain, you have your validator nodes that are basically checking and some of them producing blocks. And they have like 2 things that they're keeping track of. One is the code that actually checks whether transactions and blocks are correct. And in our case, this is really the runtime. This is, for example, the rules that check that when you try to send money from one person to another, that the signature you're providing actually is correct and corresponds to the transfer you're trying to make, and all this kind of stuff. So you have the code, the rules, and then you have the state, which is held in a database, which basically is a snapshot of the way things look now, broadly speaking. So again, if you look at money, it would be what each individual account has in terms of a balance. That would be one thing that could be in the state, in the database. For the proposal system, it could be the set of currently active proposals that are being voted on and what the votes are, for example. Okay, so you have these 2 different parts. And when you do an upgrade for one of these networks, you'll be certainly changing out some part of the code of the runtime, maybe to change the way things are verified, to fix a bug, to introduce some entirely new thing. And sometimes that's all you're going to be doing. And in those kinds of runtime upgrades, basically everything that was in the system before, in the state, is still there. It may be treated in a different way, but it's still there. And those upgrades are typically very easy, and I guess that's what he's referring to as soft upgrades. That's an example of a soft upgrade. For some upgrades, you may be changing some code that deals with things that are being actively used right now already, for example. And so in that case, for the new code to work with the database, you may have to write some extra code that is only executed one single time, and that's when you do the upgrade. And it goes in and sort of massages the database. It's called a migration, to sort of look a little bit differently. It could be very different in order to mirror what the new code assumes, right? So for example, you can assume for proposals, maybe you could imagine that we wanted there to be like a veto function or proposal on proposals where a certain person could veto a given proposal. If you made an upgrade for this and there were a bunch of proposals that were sort of being decided when you did the upgrade, then you have to go, your upgrade code, which I called the migration code, has to go in and sort of tweak the way each proposal looks and put in whoever's supposed to be the decider for all those proposals. That's just an example. And those kinds of upgrades, they're a lot more tricky, because this means you need to run code that's going to run one time when the upgrade happens. So you only get the benefit of it one time. And if you make a mistake, even if everything else, even if the new chain that you want is great, then you've messed up. And it may be really hard to recover. It gets to be a total mess. So upgrades that include migrations are very costly. So in general, developers try to avoid them typically when they're on test nets. They just sort of reset the system and say, okay, deal with it. Maybe you lost something of value, something that you'd done. You generally don't want to reset the balances, but like even other things. But on balance, it's not worth sort of trying to do those kinds of upgrades. And that would be a non-soft upgrade, I think, in the way IgreX is asking the question. So we can take that context and map it back to the three networks. So the Giza network, there we'll be adding a new storage and distribution system. So that means in the blockchain, where there's this list of every single piece of data that exists and who's supposed to be storing it and so on, like the preview image and the videos and the video assets and all this kind of stuff. This list will be replaced with a new with new code that manages that list in a different way, right? The new rules of the new storage and distribution system. And so there we have the decision. Do we want to sort of take the old way this is represented in the old database, as I said, and then write code that sort of converts it into this new way of representing data in the storage system, or should we just sort of say, okay, you know what, let's just reset it, and then we have to start from scratch to a certain extent after the upgrade, right? And so the decision there for us was pretty clear. Yes, that on balance, that's the best thing to do. So that means when the upgrade happens, you'll start with a blank content directory, so no channels, no videos, and there are like all the assets, the images, everything's gone. Now we realize that's a very stark transition, and a lot of people have published tons of things that have value. So what we'll be doing is sort of manually running like a bootstrapping script that sort of pretends as if it is all the people that had created all the channels that existed before, and sort of recreates them. So that it will re-upload all the videos and all the assets that were transferred over. And so that's part of the work that we have to do. So the upgrade itself is non-soft or hard, if you want, but we will make an effort to sort of add back the channels and videos, or a subset of the channels and videos, in order to at least not annoy too badly the people who put in a lot of effort creating those channels and videos. So I hope that was useful for Olympia. The situation is sort of analogous. Excuse me. There, everything is changing basically at the core of the system. The forum, election, council's proposal, everything's changing. So there, the calculus really is the same. It's not worth us spending a bunch of time writing one-time code to upgrade parts of Giza to Olympia, and then that being a source of error, and that requiring lots of testing. And when the overwhelming majority of all councils and elections and posts in the forum that will exist will be in the future, not in the past. So I think for me, what does that mean in the end? That means when you go to Pioneer, which in this case will be Pioneer 2, you wouldn't see proposals that were from the past. You would only see new proposals. What I would say kind of sucks about that is that the forum will be blank. That means you will not see any of the old forum posts. I think our forum is pretty awesome, so that kind of sucks, but we will see. Maybe there's something we can do about it, but I think as part of the upgrade itself, it's unlikely to be worth trying to spend the time. Certainly migrating it, maybe we can do a similar sort of repopulation script, but I think that isn't the plan currently, at least. So for the roads network, this is the network where we add NFTs to videos and channel payouts so that the working group and the DAO can pay channels directly. Now, in this case, since we're sort of not replacing anything, we're just adding new functionality. There we don't really need to do any. This is analogous to just adding new code. There's nothing you have to do to the database. So in this case, there won't be any need for like resetting or migrating anything. So it will just be as if all the videos that exist will be without an NFT, and you can go in and issue an NFT if you want to, but you don't have to. But we don't need to like reset all the videos. Okay, so I hope that gave you some understanding of what the decision is like, what's involved, and why we're choosing one alternative rather than the other. So obviously, once the system is live, like on mainnet, I think it would be very, very difficult to pass proposals to do upgrades that don't do migrations if they require them in order to preserve the existing state. But I also think that means those kinds of proposals will be harder to pass. Probably proposals that just add totally new features will be easier to pass. Okay, so second question was, do you have an understanding of the upcoming rules for publishing content? Since the platform is decentralized, it can be very attractive for authors who post content prohibited in some countries. Porn, etc., blah, blah, blah. So this is a very good question. Obviously, this isn't entirely settled, but I think the essence that you'd want to take away from this is that there are sort of multiple different levels at which decisions can be applied by different stakeholders in trying to control or administrate who gets access to what. So you could look at the DAO really being the sort of core decision maker. When I say the DAO, that can mean the council as a whole through the proposal system, or the content working group lead or the workers that have certain or storage working group leads that have certain decisions that they can make. And for example, so if you just take them as a whole, we just call them the DAO. They can first of all control what sort of new data, so that means just like raw assets like videos or images, can be uploaded from at any given time going forward. So there's a built-in blacklist in the storage system that isn't something that can be of like unlimited size, but there's like a core level blacklist there that they control, so they can add and remove things there. They can obviously control what content exists in the content directory, so they can remove videos and well, it's called curate videos currently. And if a video is removed, it's important to remember, of course, that the video and its metadata exists in like the ledger, in the history of the chain. So it's not as if someone can remove like you could go back and you figure out like what is the title and like the metadata for the content. However, when you move from the content directory, which is part of the state, as I said in the beginning, that means you can no longer manage and administrate this content. You can't like update it or change it. You can't issue NFTs. You can't receive payments or this kind of stuff. It also means that the infrastructure won't sort of honor it anymore. So that means storage providers won't store it, distributors won't send it out, and so on. So that means basically it becomes inaccessible for anyone beyond that point. So there's quite a lot of control for the council and working groups. But then there's a whole separate layer of gateways. So if you don't know what gateways are, we don't have a standalone video on that, but I would advise you to check out our token model video, which explains gateways in quite a lot of detail. Just sort of the TLDR there is that gateways are front-end providers that own the relationship with the customer and that pay on behalf of the customer into the tokenomics of the DAO by burning the native asset in order to allow people to use access the content in the system without having any crypto assets. That's like what gateways do. So think of them like in the form factor, they would be like an app running on a smart TV or a website or on your phone or something like that, right? So I guess a DApp front end is what you would actually see as a user. And these gateways, they are the ones that have the final relationship with the end user who lives in some country and therefore is subject to some kind of legal regime. So they have the final decision about what content they pay for and what content they surface to what users. So that means that even if the DAO has some content that, I have these three countries as examples, Iran, Germany, and Australia, they may have very different rules about what's allowed to show to people subject to their jurisdiction. And so the gateway has the ability to control that. Maybe gateways focus on certain jurisdictions. And even if they don't, at any rate, they get to select in order to be compliant with the relevant jurisdictions, what they surface to whom at what time. And so I think one really nice feature about this is that it means that really the DAO can be much more permissive than sort of the system as a whole, because that doesn't define a relationship, so they don't need to keep track of like who's in the EU and who's in this country and like all the, I'm sure, complicated rules that exist, because the final relationship where you actually distribute an experience and content to an end user, probably for some kind of payment, that's where the actual knowledge and information exists about who this person is and where they live and what they get to do. So that means the DAO probably is going to be much more inclusive in terms of content moderation than the individual gateways, which is where users interact. Okay, so obviously that's just me speculating. There's no guarantee in that. Here there are policy variables everywhere, but that's one way to think of it. And at any rate, there are these I guess 3 different levels of control: the blacklist for the infrastructure, inclusion or being part of the content directory, and then what gateway surface. Okay, so I hope that was useful. And yeah, that's it for this micro broadcast, I guess. Bye.